The questions on the CISSP exam are notoriously difficult. But what if I told you I had a structured approach that anyone could learn to significantly improve their odds of answering correctly? And what if I demonstrated that system for you on the most challenging and realistic set of practice questions available? Well, that's happening right here. I'm going to quickly explain my field-tested read strategy for CISSP question analysis, and then spend most of the next hour demonstrating that system in action. The secret weapon lies between your ears. Come with me and let's train your brain for game day. Questions on the CISSP exam are famously difficult, from challenging phrasing to multiple plausible answers on any given question. Today, I'm going to demonstrate for you the read strategy, a now proven approach I've developed to make those difficult questions easier. Stick with me to the end, and you'll leave this session not only understanding how it works, but how to use it yourself as you prepare for the exam. And before we do, I want to briefly share some exam preparation strategy, some recommended resources that are going to help you get across the finish line more quickly and at less expense. These are the go-to resources that have worked for many thousands before you. So in terms of my content, we have the CISSP Exam Cram Complete Course, 8 hours, 1.2 million views, very widely adopted at this point. Now for the 2024 update to the exam, I also released the CISSP 2024 Exam Addendum. That's another 2.5 hours drilling down on every new topic in the 2024 update to the CISSP. And as most do today, I recommend you use these two together for the 2024 exam. The updates in the latest release are minor. The 2021 topics are still 100% applicable, so the two together provide up-to-date coverage. And by all means, don't take my word for it. Feel free to browse the comments below the video and you'll find testimonials from many other learners who've used the Exam Cram series successfully. I also recommend you spend 30 minutes to watch my CISSP Mindset video. One of the most important things you can do in preparing for the exam is make sure you go in with that security leader mindset. And this video is going to make sure you know exactly what think like a manager means when you sit for the exam. Many students have told me this was the single most important video they watched in all of their exam preparation. And I recommend the official study guide for this exam, number one, because it's going to give you an accurate representation of which topics are covered by the exam and which are most important. But it also comes with 1,000 practice questions at no additional charge in an online system, so you have practice quizzes to help confirm you've onboarded the knowledge. You'll want to use the 10th edition, preferably in electronic format, so it's searchable. The book has an index, but no index is perfect, so you want to be able to search for information when you need it. And along with the official study guide, you'll want the accompanying practice test book, which has 4 practice exams, plus it has a 100-question test for each domain. So it makes it easier to drill down on a per-domain basis when you're finding your weak spots. Now that online quiz engine doesn't give you the ability to create bite-sized quizzes, so you kind of have to take them all at once, which isn't ideal, but we'll talk about how we fix that in just a moment. And there's one more book I'd like to tell you about that I think is worth the investment. CISSP The Last Mile from yours truly. 450 pages covering every topic, meaningful diagrams throughout, and I'm really attempting to distill the what, when, and why of concepts and technologies for when you need a simpler, more succinct explanation for what you've found in other sources like the official study guide. Really trying to make the concepts accessible to everyone, and I've priced it to be accessible to all as well. At 450 pages, you'd expect to see a book like this at around $30. You can pick it up for around $10. It's electronic-only format, full-color illustrations, great index, but searchable in a variety of formats. A couple of other resources I wanted to tell you about are the exam flashcards from Inside Cloud and Security, if you're a flashcard person, Pocket Prep for some supplemental practice questions, and Quantum Exams. So the exam flashcards that I curated, there's 1,300 across all 8 domains, definitions, page references from the official study guide, links to additional video and reading resources, and exam tips where I can offer them. Pocket Prep, great for testing your knowledge in weak areas. It's pretty affordable, around $20 a month, and they give you the ability to create custom quizzes of varying sizes and focusing on any combination of topics that represent your weak areas. Quantum Exams is something quite different. It's a good simulation of real exam question format and language. In fact, the only one I've encountered. These are the most realistic and difficult practice questions I've found for helping exam candidates prepare for the live exam. And when I came to that conclusion, that's when it occurred to me, since the focus of the READ strategy is to guide your thinking in answering difficult questions and making those difficult questions easier, what could be better than teaching you the READ strategy using questions from Quantum Exams? And they have kindly agreed to collaborate with me. I have selected 10 questions and answers directly from Quantum Exams, so I can demonstrate the READ approach in the most realistic setting possible. I'll leave links to all the study resources I've mentioned here in the video description, but now I introduce you to the READ strategy. READ is an acronym. It stands for Review, Eliminate, Analyze, and Decide. It's intended to be an easy to remember, easy to apply strategy for choosing the correct answer on any question you encounter in the CISSP exam. And it begins with review. Our goal here is to find what the core issue or issues are that we're solving for in the question. We'll read through the question looking for the details of what is being asked. What are the requirements and the context of the situation? Is there a specific regulation or framework being referenced? Which leg of the CIA triad does the question speak to? Once we've identified and prioritized what we're solving for, we move to the eliminate phase. Here our goal is to find which answers are definitely not correct. We want to identify and remove any unimportant details, any distractors, any definitely wrong answers. And the goal of this step is really to get rid of 1 or 2 answers immediately if we can. That's going to double our chances of choosing the right answer, even if we have to guess from the 2 or so answers that remain. Once we've eliminated all the elements we can, we move to the analyze phase. Here our goal is to prioritize solution requirements based on context. We want to identify all our requirements in what's being asked of us. And there may be one requirement, there may be multiple. We want to sort those requirements in priority order. And a couple of tips for this step. Remember your CISO priorities, number 1. Top priority is always human safety. Close behind that are keeping the business running securely and managing risk cost effectively while exercising due diligence and due care. Remember, as a security leader, call an outside expert is always an option. And finally, we move into the decide phase. The goal here is to select the best answer based on our decisions in the previous steps. So for the remaining answers, we'll evaluate each answer by itself. We'll identify what we do or don't like about each. And because as a security leader, our focus tends to be more tactical or strategic, I like to suggest that we look for an option that encompasses or includes the others. There's no absolutes, but that's a good strategy starting out. Do be wary of answers that call for a technical, hands-on response. On the CISSP exam, it's not often that the answer is going to begin with the implementation of some technical aim. Generally speaking, take a good people or process-focused answer over a hands-on technical answer. And remember, regulatory requirements are generally the law, or at least contractually required, and those override company policies and best practices. So I'll give you a quick reference for the READ strategy, a single page you can use to refer back to the READ strategy as you are answering questions. I'll make this available for you in PDF format so you can use this as you take your practice quizzes throughout your study process. And remember, Always know your role. Remember your CISO priorities as you're evaluating questions. And I'll provide this to you in an image format so you can keep it open on your phone or tablet as you're taking your quizzes. And you'll step through each of these 4 phases every time you're answering a question. And when you commit this to memory as a practice, when it becomes a habit, you're going to be able to do this quickly and easily. Now, as we're evaluating questions, there are some important decision criteria I want you to onboard. There are 10 of them. We want to make sure that our answer meets CISO priorities, that we're always remembering human safety, continued business operation, cost-effective risk management, that our solution meets all requirements. And when multiple answers meet requirements, we make sure that the answer we choose has objective advantages over other solutions. We need to be able to explain why our answer is better than the others. When no answer meets all requirements, pick the answer that meets the highest priority requirements. For example, nothing trumps human safety. Favor all-encompassing answers, as I mentioned. Our focus tends to be more tactical or strategic, so if we see similar answers and one encompasses the others, that's going to be the direction we tend to lean. Beware of technical hands-on solutions. The CISSP exam is going to tend to focus on people and process more than technology. That's not to say you won't occasionally see a question with a scenario where there is a technician involved, but that's not going to be the norm. And on that note, make sure that your answer is role appropriate for the party tasked with the solution. If we're talking about a manager, we're talking about a data owner, we're talking about a CISO, make sure that the action, the response, matches the role in the scenario. What is the focus of the question in the CIA triad? Are we trying to solve for confidentiality, integrity, or availability? This is a great way to eliminate some wrong answers. Which answer is scoped and tailored to the organization? Which is scoped and tailored based on business needs, risk appetite, cost effectiveness? And finally, number 10, be wary of answers that solve for all or every situation, that give us no room for tuning or tailoring from a baseline. These answers will often seem too good to be true, and generally speaking, they are. Question number 1. Mary's organization recently failed a security audit due to improper account management. Which of the following present the greatest risk to the organization? Accounts that have had gradual accumulation of access due to disparate organizational changes? User accounts that have not been logged into in 6 months? C. Unauthorized accounts that have access to a SCADA with weak passwords, which connects to a nuclear centrifuge. Or number 4, accounts with privileged access to the Bastion host. Marinate on that for about 10 seconds and choose your answer before we evaluate with the read strategy. All right, so just as a reminder, remember, step 1 is to review. Let's nail down what the true end goal is we're solving for here. So when we look at that question, I can see they're asking us to pick which of the following present the greatest risk, which means we have to establish some priorities. Going back to our list, remember, number 1 on the important decision criteria, our answer needs to meet CISO priorities. Remember, human safety is number 1, enabling continued business operation, managing risk cost effectively, both close behind. Let's go back and look at those answers again. Now, right off the bat, I can cross out a couple of options here that I know aren't the greatest risk on this list. For example, we can take option B off. User accounts that have not been logged into in 6 months are not inherently the greatest risk because I will have accounts that are only used occasionally. For example, in a bank, I have board members that might log in not more than 2 or 3 times a year, basically when they're preparing for a board meeting. Also on this list, definitely not the greatest risk. I can cross out accounts with privileged access to the Bastion host. I'm definitely going to have administrators who have privileged access so they can manage my environment. In the best case, I'm going to have time-limited, just-in-time access for them. Even if I don't, I'll likely have strong MFA in place, but in either case, that's not inherently the greatest risk I'm dealing with. So that leaves us with A, accounts that have had gradual accumulation of access due to disparate organizational changes. We'd call that permissions sprawl or privilege creep. Definitely a problem. Or unauthorized accounts that have access to a SCADA with weak passwords, which connects to a nuclear centrifuge. So going back and looking at our list of priorities, do you have the same answer now that you had before we looked at that list? The correct answer here is C. Unauthorized accounts that have access to a SCADA with weak passwords, which connects to a nuclear centrifuge. That's because unauthorized access to that SCADA system could potentially cause grave damage affecting human life. And remember, protection of human life should always be at the forefront of our business decisions. Number one CISO priority, human safety. Moving on to number 2. Kevin is the network manager at an internet service provider and is researching a solution that would help facilitate a secure connection between 2 networks. Which of the following is the best solution for Kevin to utilize? Should he A, implement a VPN with IPsec using authentication header? Should he B, implement a VPN with IPsec utilizing encapsulating security payload, ESP? Or should he C, implement a VPN connected to a Bastion host, which would act as the intermediary device between the 2 networks? Or finally D, should he implement a VPN with IPsec utilizing both authenticating header and encapsulating security payload? Take about 10 seconds, think about your answer before we go through the criteria. All right, let's peek at our read quick reference. So the review phase, what are they asking us here? What is the true end goal we're solving for? Let's go back and have a look. So I see here they want us to facilitate a secure connection between 2 networks. That tells me 2 things. I need data encryption and I need site-to-site VPN. So if I understand the fundamentals of IPsec and the difference between AH and ESP, I'm going to be able to whittle down my options pretty quickly. And that's the thing about the CISSP exam. Even though we're often operating at the tactical level, we're still expected to have a lot of technical knowledge under the hood here. So, going back to our list, we want to find a solution that meets all solution requirements. So let's go have a look at this. So as I'm looking at my options here, I know right away I can cross off A because the authentication header doesn't give me data encryption, doesn't meet the requirements. I'm also going to cross off C, this Bastion host option, using a VPN that's connecting to a Bastion host as an intermediary. This is a very unusual solution. I don't see a scenario here for a site-to-site VPN that requires a non-standard solution like this, so I'm going to take it off the table. All right, that leaves us with implementing a VPN with IPsec utilizing ESP, or an IPsec VPN where we're using both authentication header and encapsulating security payload. Which do you think it is? The answer here is actually B. Implement a VPN with ESP. And we're going to do that because that encapsulating security payload provides encryption, ensures confidentiality, that confidentiality that's clearly called out in the requirements. It also offers data integrity and optional authentication, making this a comprehensive solution for securing communication between the 2 networks. So technically, would using both authentication header and ESP work? Yes, but ESP plus authentication header is redundant, and thus it is less efficient and more complex. So the simplest solution that meets our requirements is the winner. Moving on to number 3. A financial services company is implementing a new encryption strategy. The CISO emphasizes the importance of protecting sensitive customer data while ensuring performance for high-volume transactions. The encryption must meet regulatory requirements for confidentiality and support fast processing times. which encryption method would be best? Is it A, Blowfish, designed by the famous Bruce Schneier? AES 256, Advanced Encryption Standard with a 256-bit key. Data Encryption Standard? Or D, RSA 4096? Many people ask me, do I really need to memorize all those algorithms and how they work and how secure they are, etc.? This is a great example of why you do. You're not always going to get a lot of direct questions on them. You might only have 1 or 2 questions related to encryption algorithms on the entire exam, but this is a great opportunity to put that knowledge into play. Pick your answer. Let's go check our read quick reference. So remember, what are they asking us for? Let's drill down on the true end goal here. And do we have any process frameworks or regulatory requirements? Let's go mark this up. So we see we're protecting sensitive customer data. So that's our key goal here in choosing an algorithm. It mentions that we need to ensure performance for high volume transactions. And it also mentions that the encryption must meet regulatory requirements. So these 3 things give me a couple of hints about which answer is going to be best. There are definitely multiple answers here that may do the job, that will do the job. I can see 2 here that will technically on paper do the job. So we need a symmetric algorithm. We know that because we're talking about fast bulk data encryption. And we need to meet regulatory requirements. So we've gathered all of our criteria here as far as what they're asking us for. Let's go look at our list. So when multiple answers meet requirements, we want to choose an answer that has objective advantages over the other solutions. So when I come back here and look, as I'm evaluating my options here, as I'm analyzing, they talk about meeting regulatory requirements, but they don't tell me what regulatory requirements. So it's really hard for me to pick one answer that's going to meet all requirements, but it gives me a hint as to a more likely answer. So I know right off the bat, though, I'm going to cross out data encryption standard because it's not secure. It's been deprecated many, many years ago. Short key length, easily broken, unsuitable for modern encryption. We're also going to take RSA off the list. This is an asymmetric algorithm, typically used for key exchanges. It's going to be slower than symmetric algorithms for bulk data encryption, which brings us down to 2 options, Blowfish or AES 256. So what say you now? And is it the same answer you had before we evaluated? The answer is B, AES 256. And the reason being, AES 256 is a symmetric encryption algorithm, as is Blowfish, but it's known for its high security and its great performance. It's the most widely adopted symmetric algorithm. It's used for large volumes of data. It complies with many regulatory standards. It's a go-to for the U.S. federal government Department of Defense. So while 2 options would technically do the job, we see objective advantages in option B. So more secure, high performance, wider adoption, regulatory alignment makes it the better answer. Moving on to number 4. Plug Incorporated is performing an asset inventory as part of a business impact assessment, and it's come across some fax machines that are used to send and receive confidential information. Which of the following is the most effective method to ensure protection of confidential information? So, should we A, ensure fax machines are only located in secure areas, or B, replace fax machines with multi-purpose printers and scanners, or C, develop and implement a policy discouraging the use of fax machines to send and receive confidential information, or D, implement logging on the fax machines? Let's check our read cheat sheet. Remember, what are we being asked? What is the bottom line end goal we're solving for? Any process frameworks, regulatory requirements, mitigating circumstances here? This is pretty simple. It's protecting confidential information. And this is really a unique scenario versus most CISSP questions because we're dealing with physical media here. We're talking about paper. So our options are going to be somewhat limited. So going back to our list of decision criteria, number 4, when no answer meets all requirements, pick the answer that meets the highest priority requirements. And the fact of the matter is here I have 4 answers that will each do something to help me with the protection of confidential information, but it comes down to meeting my highest priorities. So I'm going to cross a couple off the list right away. I'm going to cross off replacing fax machines with multipurpose printers and scanners. That's not very cost effective, so my priorities as a CISO, which include human safety, keeping the business running, mitigating risk cost effectively. Replacing fax machines with more expensive multipurpose devices is not cost effective. I'm going to cross off implementing logging on the fax machines. That's going to give me an audit trail. I'm going to be able to see who sent the fax and potentially left it behind after the fact. But that doesn't protect the confidential information. It allows me to come back and use that as a learning opportunity after the fact, after the damage has been potentially done. So, do I ensure fax machines are only located in secure areas? Or do I develop and implement a policy discouraging the use of fax machines to send and receive confidential information? The answer is A. Ensure fax machines are only located in secure areas. Essentially, fax machines offer several methods and services that are vulnerable to attacks, but due to the physical nature of the transmission to and from the machine, moving to a secure area would be an effective security method to limit unauthorized disclosure. Because another one of my priorities that I always want to remember, a fundamental principle, is there is no security without physical security. Do the questions seem to be getting easier? Trust me, they're not. They're still coming from the quantum exams pool. Any improvement may be evidence that your thought processes are beginning to align with the READ strategy. Practice makes perfect. Let's continue. Moving on to number 5. Finance Station is a private financial institution that deals with various forms of personally identifiable information, PII. As such, as a financial institution, the company is looking for a way to assess technical controls. What would be the best way to achieve this? A. Perform a SOC 1 audit. B. Perform a SOC 2 audit. C. Perform a risk assessment. Or D. Hire a penetration tester to assess weaknesses. Going to take about 10 seconds. Pick your answer. Let's go quickly revisit our READ strategy worksheet here. Remember, step 1. What are they asking us here? What is the true end goal we're solving for? Do we see any process frameworks or regulations that are going to kick in here? Let's go back here and look and break this down. So PII shows up, which means we're going to have some potentially privacy requirements that hit us here. So we want a high level of assurance. We need to assess our technical controls. When I look at these 4 options, every one of these will assess our technical controls in one way or another. So let's go to our list here. So number 5, favor all-encompassing answers. So let's go back and apply that principle in what we see here. So there are a couple that I can knock off the list right away because they're not all-encompassing. They're missing something. So I can take the SOC audit off, and this is a bit of a distractor here. Let's revisit our READ cheat sheet. So in the eliminate phase, we're eliminating unimportant details intended to distract. So we see here in the question, it mentions that Finance Station is a private financial institution. They give us the option of a SOC 1 audit. If you know your SOC audit types, SOC 1 audits specifically evaluate the effectiveness of controls that impact financial reporting. It's a great distractor, but it's taking our eyes off the objective. They asked us to assess technical controls, the controls already in place. So SOC 1 is not our answer. So I'm also going to knock risk assessment off the list here, because a risk assessment is meant to determine what the risks to an organization are, which is then used to determine what controls, if any, we will deploy. So the risk assessment would do us more good earlier in the process when we're assessing the controls we might need to put in place, not assessing the controls that are already in place, not its primary purpose. That leaves us with performing a SOC 2 audit or hiring a penetration tester to assess weaknesses. And the correct answer here is B, perform a SOC 2 audit. So a SOC 2 audit deals with the assessment of technical controls. And in its Type 2 format, a SOC 2 Type 2 audit, it actually tests the efficacy of those controls over time. A penetration test, on the other hand, is meant to evaluate the security controls by safely trying to exploit their vulnerabilities. So here, SOC 2 meets the objectives directly. It's a known standard, gives us the highest level of assurance. SOC 2 is the winner. Moving on to number 6. John, a network engineer, is tasked with securing a corporate network against unauthorized access. During a recent review, he found that many employees are sharing their login credentials with their colleagues. What is the most effective measure John should implement first? So what is the next step? Should he monitor user activity for unusual login patterns? Should he conduct training sessions on password security? Should he implement two-factor authentication for all accounts? Or should he develop a strict password policy? Stop for about 10 seconds here. Choose your answer. All right, let's go look at our READ cheat sheet. So what are they asking us to do here? What is the true end goal we're solving for? Do they have any process frameworks, any regulatory requirements factoring in here? Let's take a look. So we're securing our network from unauthorized access. The problem we're dealing with directly is that employees are sharing their login credentials. We know right away this breaks non-repudiation. When we have shared credentials, we can't tie actions in the audit trail back to a specific party because they're sharing an account. Let's go look at our list here. So we want to beware of technical hands-on solutions. Remember, the CISSP is going to tend to focus on people and process more than technology, although that's not always true. So let's go back here and see what we can eliminate. So, monitoring user activity for unusual login patterns, not an effective next step because we already know the users are sharing their login credentials. So just because they're logging in doesn't really tell us that we're going to know who's logging in or really identify anything in terms of an unusual pattern. And also implementing two-factor authentication for all accounts. What good does it do to solve the core problem if we implement two-factor authentication for an account that everyone's sharing? We still have the problem remaining when we're done. That leaves us with two options here. We can conduct training sessions on password security, teach our users that it's not right to share login credentials, or we can develop a strict password policy. What say you? And is your answer now different than it was before we evaluated the situation using the READ strategy? The correct answer is to develop a strict password policy. Developing that password policy is essential to establish clear guidelines for password creation, sharing, management, and addressing the immediate issue of credential sharing. Training, on the other hand, raises awareness after the policy establishes the requirement. So definitely value in training the users, but after we have developed that password policy. That's our best next step. That brings us to number 7. Jacob works for a financial firm located in the European Union, and he's responsible for the documentation related to the company's security program. Jacob is looking to notate and confirm that proper classification of PII, personally identifiable information is in place, what would be the best way for Jacob to obtain this information? Is it A, confer with the data custodian as they are responsible for labeling the records? Or is it B, as the data owner, Jacob can review the individual records? Or C, should Jacob confer with the information owners? Or finally, D, should he discuss with the data steward as they are responsible for what is stored in the data? Take a few seconds and pick your answer, and then we'll go evaluate. All right, back here in the review phase, what are they asking us to do? This one's a bit complicated. Pay careful attention. Are there any process, frameworks, or regulatory requirements involved? We're going to see a few yeses here. So we see a financial firm located in the European Union. We see PII involved here. That tells us that GDPR regulations definitely apply. Let's go look at our decision criteria here. So we need an answer that is role appropriate for the party tasked with the solution. We saw lots of data roles called out here in the potential answers. So we need a role appropriate response. So right off the bat, I know I can eliminate the data custodian. The data custodian is taking orders from up the chain. They will be implementing and managing day-to-day activity. They're not decision makers. They are implementing the decisions of others. And there's another clever distraction here. We can eliminate B. It mentions as the data owner, Jacob can review the individual records. Go back and look at what the question asked us here. They mentioned Jacob's role. He's responsible for the documentation related to the company's security program. It doesn't say Jacob is the data owner. So that is absolutely a distraction. Now, it's also true that the data owner is responsible for classification, not just the review, but that's not Jacob. So we have two options here. We can confer with the information owners, or we can discuss with the data steward as they are responsible for what is stored in the data. What say you? And is your answer different than it was before we evaluated the question again with our criteria? The correct answer is C, confer with the information owners. The information owner is responsible for determining how data should be classified and protected. They can provide authoritative insight into the classification and handling requirements for PII, ensuring that proper classification is in place. So again, role appropriate. Number 8, Scott is a security practitioner and is responsible for protecting data to ensure validity. Which of the following would be the best solution to ensure compliance? Is it A, traffic padding, B, data classification, C, an intrusion detection system, or D, redundant system design? All right, revisiting the READ strategy. Let's make sure we identify our true end goal here. What are they asking us to do at the end of the day? This question is a bit more vague. It's a bit higher level, big picture. They're not giving us a lot of detail here. Far fewer words than we typically see. Do we see any process frameworks or regulatory requirements coming in here? Let's go back and have a look. So our goal is to ensure validity. And Scott is a security practitioner. So when we look at our potential answers here, there are a couple we can knock off the list right away. So let's go back and look at our decision criteria. It mentions that we need to look at the focus of the question in the CIA triad. So let's go back and look at what they're asking here. Ensuring validity, well, validity means integrity. Okay, that gives us a clue as to what we can rule out right out of the gate. So we can take traffic padding off right away. Traffic padding is used for confidentiality, and it adds additional data in network traffic, which in turn obfuscates the sender, receiver, and or the data that's being transmitted. So that's focused on confidentiality. Wrong answer. Data classification, which is used to help implement confidentiality as well. So we can take these two right off the list. Now we have intrusion detection system and D, redundant system design. What say you now? And is it the same answer you had before we evaluated using our READ criteria? The correct answer is redundant system design. So at the end of the day, Scott is responsible for protecting integrity, validity. If the data is valid, it's accurate, and if it's accurate, it has integrity. So redundant system design ensures data availability. It can contribute to integrity by having backup systems to prevent data loss. Redundancy controls failures by providing several identical functional units, monitoring the behavior of each to detect faults, and initiating a transition to a safe, secure condition if a discrepancy is detected. So IDS could help us out. So an IDS utilizes file integrity checking, which involves generating cryptographic checksums for critical files, comparing them to baselines, and identifying differences. But at the end of the day, the IDS is primarily focused on detecting malicious activity. It doesn't directly ensure data validity. It would do better at spotting a lack of integrity versus actually protecting integrity. That's why redundant system design wins, because it protects integrity. The CIA triad is a fundamental concept covered in Domain 1. You really need to be familiar. It needs to be top of mind for you. Which controls protect confidentiality versus integrity versus availability. So I want to show you a few examples of each. You can use this as reference, and maybe it helps you to commit these to that long-term muscle memory. So confidentiality is protected through encryption, access controls, authentication systems, VPN connections where we can potentially create an encrypted tunnel, anonymizing technologies, data masking, data obfuscation. Integrity, on the other hand, data validity, is supported through digital signatures, a hash function, so we can make sure that when we copy a file that the hash of that file is the same both before and after the copy. Message authentication codes, version control systems, a write once, read many drive, worm storage that we would use in forensic situations to maintain the integrity of our evidence, or blockchain ledgers. And in the availability category, we have failover clustering, disaster recovery sites, redundant servers and infrastructure, distributed computing, load balancers, backup systems, RAID arrays, high availability systems. So it's all about redundancy, high availability, and disaster recovery. So make sure that you really understand confidentiality, integrity, and availability down to your bones. It needs to be second nature, and it's going to be a big boon in eliminating wrong information, definitely wrong answers, and it's going to be a big help in your time management. But mapping the ask to the CIA triad can make the eliminate phase very simple, as we saw in our last example. As you master the system, the gaps in your underlying technical knowledge will become more obvious. And that's okay, it's part of the process. To optimize your study time, you need to know what you don't know so you can target some study cycles to ramp up in those areas. Let's go through a few more questions. Moving on to number 9. Dorian is a security professional for a healthcare corporation. So due to HIPAA regulations, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, Dorian must find methods to protect any PHI, public health information, or you may see it called protected health information on the exam. Which security approach will best minimize PHI loss from a data breach? Is it A, a data collection baseline, B, continuous monitoring, C, end-to-end data encryption, or D, a strong breach notification process? So again, going back to our reference here, What are they asking us? What's the true end goal? Do we have any regulatory requirements here? So we see here HIPAA applies. So we definitely have a regulatory requirement. So what is the real ask here? Dorian must find methods to protect any PHI. So let's look at our list. So which answer is scoped and tailored to the organization? So based on our needs, our risk appetite, cost effectiveness, what's the best answer that's tailored to the situation here? So we see continuous monitoring. That's an all-encompassing generic solution. That's really nothing to do with this specific situation where we need to find methods to protect any PHI. Continuous monitoring won't minimize loss. It's really a detective control. It's not going to prevent loss or minimize anything. I can also cross off a strong breach notification process. Breach notification kicks in after the breach occurred. We've been asked to protect PHI, to prevent the breach, to minimize the possibility of a breach. That leaves us two options: a data collection baseline or end-to-end data encryption. Which approach will best minimize PHI loss from a data breach? The correct answer is a data collection baseline. The best way to minimize loss from a breach would be to collect just the required information necessary. This is an example of privacy by design, in which you collect only the bare minimum, the baseline data needed for your work. So this is really data minimization. The baseline is scoped and tailored to fit our needs in this specific situation. So end-to-end encryption is not without its value, but a data breach requires access to a system or a device so we can assume that data is no longer being transferred, and the access by a malicious entity would have to access the files that are at rest. End-to-end encryption is a method of securing communication that prevents parties from grabbing that data while it is in transit. And we could interpret that end-to-end data encryption also means at rest, but if we interpret that in the narrowest definition, end-to-end encryption definitely focuses on data in transit. So that was a tricky one. So let's talk about tailoring and scoping. So tailoring is modifying a list of security controls to align with the organization's mission. A server needs to comply with an external entity standard, so we would select a baseline provided by that entity, for example. So if we are a bank and we're subject to federal regulations, we might select a baseline from CISSP or NIST. So scoping is part of the tailoring process, and it refers to reviewing a list of security controls and selecting the security controls that apply to our situation. So even if an organization isn't legally required to comply with a specific standard, using a well-designed standard can be helpful. It allows us to scope and tailor a solution to our specific circumstances. These focus on customizing the solution for the business. Something to bear in mind as you're analyzing the potential answers. All right, number 10. A large financial organization wants to enhance the security of its cloud infrastructure by ensuring that sensitive data remains encrypted during transmission, storage, and processing. The security team is also responsible for monitoring and detecting potential threats within the cloud environment. Which of the following steps should the company first prioritize to achieve these objectives? Should they A, implement end-to-end encryption across all communication channels? Should they B, establish a comprehensive incident response plan? Should they C, set up a virtual private cloud to isolate workloads? Or should they D, deploy a cloud access security broker to monitor cloud activity? Long-winded questions and answered. So let's be very careful about drilling down on what is specifically being asked, what is our true end goal here? We want to keep an eye out for process frameworks or regulatory requirements. So we see here the ask is ensuring that sensitive data remains encrypted during transmission, storage, and processing. That means all three states of data: at rest, in transit, and in use. So based on those requirements, that ask, it also mentions here that the security team is responsible for monitoring and detecting potential threats within the cloud environment. So we need to monitor and detect within the cloud. So we have three more elements there. So let's go look at our list. We want to be wary of answers that solve for all or every situation, that don't give us room for tuning or tailoring. So in our list of 4 options here, I see a couple that attempt to solve for all and every scenario, but not very effectively. So option A, for example, implement end-to-end encryption across all communication channels. Well, if I'm working with third-party cloud storage providers, Box, Dropbox, OneDrive, maybe even copying files into an AWS storage bucket, I really don't control both ends of the conversation there. That's not all my infrastructure, so implementing end-to-end encryption across all communication channels really won't meet all the channels I'm dealing with here. I'm going to cross that one off. Another one that looks problematic to me is setting up a virtual private cloud to isolate workloads. A VPC we definitely see in an IaaS context where we're working with virtual machines. We'd see a VPC in a platform as a service context where under the hood we're potentially dealing with VMs, maybe ephemeral VMs. But we're going to have control in those scenarios. But outside of those scenarios, in the storage scenarios I described, a VPC doesn't really factor, particularly when we're going out to third parties. So I have a couple of options here. I can establish a comprehensive incident response plan. So I can basically respond quickly when I see a problem, or I can deploy a cloud access security broker to monitor cloud activity. So what say you now? And is your answer now different than it was before we evaluated? So the correct answer here is to deploy a cloud access security broker, or CISSP for short, to monitor cloud activity. So deploying a CISSP will allow us to monitor and secure cloud activity, ensuring data remains protected across various cloud services and providing visibility into potential threats. And in fact, your modern CISSPs these days will allow you not just to monitor activity, but we can potentially prevent unsanctioned activity. So if someone tries to copy our sensitive data into a third-party cloud provider we don't like, so maybe we're a Box customer and somebody tries to copy data into Dropbox, we can potentially, with a CISSP, prevent that activity. Some of your CISSPs will incorporate governance actions that will even allow you to pull data back out of a cloud provider and prevent an action altogether, maybe even to block that user for a time. So the CISSP is going to be specific to our scenario to monitor, detect, protect, and has the cloud focus that we need. Now, establishing a comprehensive incident response plan is not a bad idea, but incident response focuses on handling security breaches rather than preventive monitoring and encryption. All right, my friends, that brings us to the end of our practice questions, but I have a little bonus for you here. Commonly, I get questions around the other types of questions that you'll see on the CISSP exam, specifically questions that are in what we'd call the advanced question types category, basically not multiple choice. So I will say, just right off the bat though, the vast majority of your questions are going to be multiple choice. The advanced innovative questions can take a couple of different forms, so I want to describe them to you and then show you how to deal with them so you can apply the read strategy to questions of any type. So we have the drag and drop question, where you're required to drag one or more answers from one side of the screen into a box on the other side of the screen, and you'll typically only drag the correct answers. The hotspot requires you to click on a specific point in a graphic representation like a diagram of a network architecture. It's usually going to ask you to identify where a particular component would be located or where a particular type of attack would be likely to originate. So you want to watch for the drag and drop and the hotspot. Now these question types do have one important thing in common that I do want you to be aware of. And that is they're both just fancy versions of a multiple choice question. We can convert these into a multiple choice question and apply the read method if you find it easier to do this. So let's take the drag and drop question, for example. So here we go. Which of the following are hashing algorithms? Select all that apply by dragging them to the correct answers box. So we're going to convert this to a multiple choice question, and then we are going to apply the read strategy. This time we're going to just do it without going back and looking at our cheat sheets. We're going to commit this to memory, right? So our possible answers include AES 256, MD5, SHA 224, Blowfish, ECC, and ECDSA. And we have to drag those into the correct answers box. So really what we're looking at here is a multiple choice question with multiple answers. We have 6 options instead of 4, and we're going to pick multiples, all that apply, by dragging them into the box. So if I were to restructure this as a multiple choice question, I'm going to change select all that apply to select all that apply from my list here. And now it's a matter of looking at what we're being asked. Number one, we're going to review. So they're asking us which of the following are hashing algorithms. That's pretty simple. It's down to our ability to identify a hashing algorithm. So there are a few that we can knock off the list here. We know that AES 256 is a very popular symmetric encryption algorithm. I see ECDSA, even if you don't know exactly what that is. It's elliptic curve digital signature algorithm, but I can spot DSA and know that that stands for digital signature algorithm, even if I don't know much. Blowfish, another popular symmetric algorithm, so I've knocked yet another one off the list. And at this point, it's down to your knowledge of which of these are hashing functions and which are symmetric or asymmetric algorithms. I do get a lot of questions from candidates around the need to learn about the different cryptography concepts, and in particular, do I need to learn about asymmetric and symmetric algorithms and these hashing functions? And the fact of the matter is, yes, you do. You might only see a couple of questions on the exam that are directly related, but it's going to pay dividends. And in this case, your knowledge doesn't need to be that deep. You simply need to know which of these are hashing functions and which are encryption algorithms. And so in this case, our answer is 2, MD5, and 3, SHA 224. So MD5 and SHA 224 are hashing algorithms. AES 256 and Blowfish are symmetric algorithms. ECC, elliptic curve, is a public key or asymmetric algorithm. And ECDSA is used in digital signature. So you didn't even have to have knowledge that's all that deep. Familiarity with the key sizes, the key lengths, could factor. It's going to be a little less likely than just understanding those fundamental concepts around encryption algorithms and hash functions, but potentially handy in the right scenario. So converting a drag and drop question to a multiple choice question so we could apply the strategy, pretty easy. Now let's look at a hotspot question by comparison. So you need to secure apps from inbound connections and secure users' outbound connections. You should deploy the least number of devices to meet the need. What do you do? And they ask us to click a letter and select a number where we place the appropriate device. So using the read strategy, we see we're asked to secure inbound connections and outbound connections. And the criteria here is that we do so with the least number of devices that meet the need. Now, what would it take to convert this to a multiple choice question? Well, I'd have to likely use my notes and write out combinations of these devices plugged into A, B, and C, and then eliminate the wrong answers, move to that eliminate phase. And frankly, I think that that is more trouble than it's worth, especially because you're not going to see many hotspot questions. So if I were to turn this into a multiple choice question, it's going to look something like this. And then I would eliminate. So I see that while option A meets the inbound and outbound connection security needs, it's certainly a lot of devices, so that's not going to meet the criteria. I noticed that option D that I penciled in, the web app firewall as the single device, would secure inbound connections, but a web app firewall does nothing to secure my outbound user connections, which leaves me with deploying a web app firewall and a network IPS at options B and C, so basically one on the inbound link and one on the outbound, or just deploying a next generation firewall at point A, covering all the inbound and outbound. And in fact, that would be the answer that meets the criteria, because a next gen firewall is multifunctional, layer 7, has access to real-time threat intelligence, can handle the proxy functionality that we'd need for our outbound user connections. So it meets all the requirements. But again, a lot of trouble. And for the very small number of hotspot questions you're going to see, just tackle them as you encounter them. Don't bother trying to convert them, as we saw here. And that's what the correct answer would look like. So you could have simply clicked on A and selected a next-gen firewall. Again, there's some knowledge involved here, so certainly not a freebie, but no great value in converting hotspot questions to multiple choice. And my friends, that's what I have for you in this session. I hope you found the demonstration of the READ strategy with the questions from our friends at Quantum Exams helpful. Thanks again to them for the collaboration. Again, you'll find all of the recommended study resources and their links in the video description, as well as the link to the READ strategy cheat sheet. Take that strategy forward, use it in your practice quizzes, so when you get to exam day, it's second nature, making those difficult questions easier. I hope you got value from the session. I hope you continue to get value from the Exam Cram series. If you have questions, reach out to me anytime on LinkedIn or over on the Certification Station Discord. Good luck on your exam, and until next time, take care and stay safe.